there friends, this is a tutorial for how you can build this two-way 6 TNT mega bomber. This is not really designed to be a practical device, this is more just because it's really fun. I based the bomber on a 9 TNT duper array that was found on Reddit. I will provide a link in the description. I'm not going to do a tutorial for this one because it's not my own design, but it's very similar to my design. The major difference is that mine was made to be two-way, so you wouldn't need the docking stations for this one, and otherwise the design is very similar. I will, however, include this design in the world download if you are interested. Choosing where to place the machine is actually one of the most important parts of building it. The explosions will reach 82 blocks below the lowest point of the build. So if you want it to reach the top point of bedrock, you need to place it at Y87. And if you want it to reach the lowest part of the bedrock to blow up all the blocks within bedrock, you need to place it at the highest at Y83. However, these areas are not generally safe places to place it because the TNT will often fling itself upwards and it can actually hit the machine and blow it up. So in order to avoid that, you want to place it at least 27 blocks above ground level. If you want to be really safe, 30 to 32 is the best, and it also depends on what's on the ground. So stone has very high blast resistance. It doesn't tend to bounce up as much on stone, but on dirt or sand it might bounce up quite a bit more, and you might want to err towards the side of 32. So often it can be hard to reach bedrock with just one machine. In this case, our ground level is at 60, so we're going to place it at Y90, 30 blocks above our ground level. So I've created a little red zone here. This is 7 blocks wide. This is the area that is pretty much guaranteed to get blown up all the way down. There'll be quite a lot of extra destruction as well, but this is the area that you're pretty much guaranteed every block going down is going to be destroyed. So most likely you'll just mark off the two ends or whatever, but we'll come in from one of the sides, we'll come in 4 blocks, and then slightly off center, we can scaffolding up from there up to the highest point of our build. So we'll go up to Y=90 from here. All right, we've reached our destination Y level. If I go into my F3 screen, you can see on the right, targeted block is at Y level 90, and I want to place a block on the side of the scaffolding so that it's in the middle of my red zone. In survival, it may be easier to go 1 block lower, place a solid block on top of your scaffolding, and then place a block on the side of that, and then we can remove this temporary block right here. This one is also a temporary block, and then we want to place a slime on top of that temporary block, and then a solid block, and then an obsidian on the side of that solid block. If we're inside the red zone looking outward, the obsidian should be on the right side. If you're looking into your red zone, the obsidian would be on the left side. And then we want to place 4 fence gates facing outward, there, like that, from our slime block, like so. You can actually walk across these in survival. And then you can place a slime block on the other end. You might need to place a couple temporary blocks in order to get that placed properly, and then place a solid block on top of that. You can walk across these fence gates and then open them on the way back. And then we're going to place some TNT on top of the first fence gate and the third fence gate, like so. And we're going to place some coral fans on this last solid block right here and on the inside of this TNT. Doesn't matter what color they are, just as long as they are the fan type of coral, and they will die, or you can place the dead variety if you want. And then we want to place some temporary blocks on top of each of these solid blocks, and on top of each of the TNT place more solid blocks on each side of the 2 solid blocks on both ends, and then place TNT on the side of the temporary blocks that are on top of your TNT. And you can remove these temporary blocks now, and you can place some more coral fans like that and like that, so they're on the end 2 blocks here and on these 2 side TNTs. We probably could have left this last temporary block right there because we actually want to place another solid block on the other side of the TNT of this temporary block, and we actually want to come out a total of 6 blocks, so that's 3, 4, 5, 6, like so. And then you can remove that temporary block now, and then place a slime block on top of the end here, and then a solid block, skip a block, solid block, skip a block, slime block, and then in these gaps right here, place detector rails facing towards the sides like this, and then place minecarts on top of those. And then let's come back down to our scaffolding here, place a temporary block back on our scaffolding again. You can remove this one now, and then we want to come back an additional 16 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then place a solid block on the inside of this temporary block so that it's at the middle of our red zone. Place a lever on the outside of that block and a trapdoor on the inside. Place an observer facing straight up on top of that trapdoor, and then 2 more solid blocks. And then you want to skip 2 blocks, place a temporary block on the side of your other temporary blocks so you can place an observer facing straight up, place a temporary block on the side of that so that you can place a piston facing towards the front, and then you can remove these 2 temporary blocks. You might want to leave these temporary blocks for now so that you can walk across them. And then we want to place 2 repeaters facing backwards on top of these 2 solid blocks here. Put those on maximum ticks. Place a temporary block on top of this solid block with a lever on it. Place a solid block on top of that. 2 more temporary blocks going back. Remove the middle one so that you can place a sticky piston pointing in towards that solid block. Remove the other temporary block. Put a lever there in its place, and then you can remove this temporary block as well. And then we've got the on-off switch for the whole machine. Turn it on for right now so we can place a dropper on top of that solid block, and then turn it off for safety. And then go ahead and place an observer pointing out of that dropper into a solid block. Put redstone dust on top of that solid block. Place an obsidian on the end of these 2 repeaters, and then facing towards the front, you're going to place a repeater on maximum ticks on top of that obsidian. If you want, you can place an obsidian right here to make sure you don't accidentally trigger off the machine. Shouldn't be necessary, but it might be nice for some peace of mind. And then you might want to remove these temporary blocks right here. They'll get a little harder to remove after we place a temporary block right next to this piston here. Place an observer facing in towards that piston on top of that temporary block. Remove the temporary block. Slime block on the end of that observer, going into a sticky piston facing backwards, and another slime block going into an observer facing in towards that obsidian. And then on top of that observer, we want another observer facing the opposite direction, going into a sticky piston, and then 2 more slime blocks. And if you didn't place it as obsidian, you might want to place a temporary block there so we can stand on top of it, place observers on all 3 sides of that slime block there, and then on the front of those, place regular pistons. And we've got our little flying machine here. And now we might want to remove the rest of these temporary blocks here, and then come on over to the other side and place a solid block on the side of this observer here. And then we're going to come up a block with a temporary block so that we can place a block like that. So we're stair stepping up, and then we're going to stair step up towards the front now with another temporary block, and then solid block, and then temporary block, and then 2 solid blocks like so. Remove the temporary blocks, and then we're going to come across with glass or slabs until we reach the slime block right here. And when we reach the slime block, we want to place a solid block adjacent to it, and then come down to this obsidian, place a temporary block next to it, place a note block towards the front, and a solid block on top of it. Remove the temporary block, place redstone dust on top of the note block and the solid block. Place glass on top of the redstone dust on top of the note block. This cannot be a slab, it needs to be glass. And then have redstone dust run all the way across, except for on this solid block right here, we need a repeater on just 1 tick, and then run redstone dust the rest of the way down. And we're actually done with this side here. It's now safe to remove this obsidian block. Just make sure you don't mess with this repeater right here. That would actually trigger off the machine. What I want to do is I want to stand in the center of my machine and face forward. And you see I open up the F3 screen. You can see I'm facing in a negative Z direction. So that means my X coordinate is going to stay the same. So I'm in the middle of the machine right now. So I'm looking down. I can see my X coordinate is negative 241. So when I come to the other side, I want to make sure I'm looking at the exact same X coordinate when I'm at the middle of my red zone. If I come over here, we look down, negative 241. So you want to make sure that the center of both sides of the machine are at exactly the same coordinate for whatever axis you're building it on. And then again, I want to come in 4 blocks from the outside of my red zone here, and then I want to off-center scaffolding up to the appropriate Y level on this side as well. Very similar on this side, just a little bit different. I got a temporary block on top of my scaffolding. We're at Y level 90 right here. We're going to come in 1 block towards the center, just like we did last time, and then we're going to come up with 2 temporary blocks. No slime or solid block here, just the obsidian on the side of it. And if we're facing in towards our red zone, it's going to be on the left. If we're facing out, it's going to be on the right. We can remove these 3 temporary blocks, and then we're going to come back another 16 blocks like we did last time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Solid block on the side at the middle. Switch on the back of that. Trapdoor on the front. Observer facing straight up. 2 solid blocks. Skip 2 blocks. Temporary block there. Observer facing straight up. Another temporary block on the side of that. So we can place a piston facing forward just like we did last time. Then we're going to place 2 more repeaters on 4 ticks on these 2 solid blocks here. This time it's going to go into a solid block, and then we're going to place 2 solid blocks on top of those 2 repeaters. We don't need an on-off switch on this side. Place redstone dust on top of those solid blocks, and then a piston, obsidian on the end of these redstone, and then we're going to place a repeater on top of that obsidian facing forward on 4 ticks. And then we can remove these temporary blocks and set up the flying machine again. So that would be a temporary block right there next to the piston, observer facing in towards the piston on top of it, into a slime block, sticky piston, slime block, observer facing in towards this obsidian, observer facing the other direction on top of it, going into a sticky piston, and 2 slime blocks. And you can place either your safety obsidian or a temporary block right there. So we can place 3 observers on the sides of these slime blocks, and then 3 pistons on the sides of those, and there's our flying machine. And then we can remove the rest of these temporary blocks here, and then again we're going to come over to the other side. On the side of this observer here, place a solid block. We're going to stair step up, then we're going to turn towards the front, stair step up again, and then stair step up 1 more time. This time we're going to place 2 solid blocks, remove our temporary blocks there, and then we're going to place glass or slabs all the way up until we were 1 block shy of this obsidian here. Then we're going to place a solid block, place a temporary block on the side of the obsidian, place a note block towards the front, solid block on top, remove the temporary block, place redstone dust and glass on top of the redstone dust on top of the note block, redstone dust all the way back except for right here. I'm going to place a repeater on 1 tick, and then redstone dust. And we're done. Let's remove the scaffolding as well. To operate the machine, you've got to turn it on first with this top switch, and then you've got to activate it with the bottom switch right here, and that will actually start the machine going. And we've actually left the other flying machine on the other side, so when it reaches that side, we're going to have to activate it from that side as well, just once, and then after that it will go back and forth on its own. And you can see here it's docked on the other side. And also I forgot to remove this obsidian. Make sure you remove that obsidian, and then we can trigger it off here on this side, and on the way back it will not fire any TNT, but it will now operate back and forth normally. You don't need to activate it any more times, but if you do want to stop it, you can come over to this side and turn it off with the on-off switch, and that will stop it. And then in order to start it again, you'd have to turn it on again and activate it in order for it to do that. So we can actually see that happen here. As we will dock it, it will actually stop because we've turned it off, but if it were on, it would actually continue going normally. And you can see it's docked here again. We can turn it on again, and we can activate it again, and now it will go normally. It would just go back and forth. And here we can see all the damage that that thing wrought. This thing is very powerful. But if you want to go for absolute maximum devastation, you can actually put these things right next to each other. Here I've done 6 just like I did in my survival world. And if you do that, you might want to join up these switches here so we can actually just bridge across this right here. We can remove the extra switches. And then we want to place repeaters wherever there is a solid block next to it, like so. There we go. And then redstone dust across all the rest of it. And then now we've got all those activator switches connected to the same circuit. And then up top, we might want to set up these ones as well. So let's put a block on top of that piston. Let's actually move the lever up there. And then place solid blocks next to them. And just kind of continue this pattern here. Remove the extra switches. Like so. And then place repeaters pointing out of all of these solid blocks. And then redstone dust across the whole thing. And now our on-off switch is all running across the same circuit. You can obviously just fire these all in sequence if you wanted to not lag out your server or cause a bunch of damage, because the more of these you fire, the more likely it's going to shoot up at itself. So you could just fire them all in sequence manually if you wanted to, but I find it's the most fun to just fire them off all at once. There we go. And then I've already done the same thing to the other side over here, so when we get over here we will need to switch it on once. And it's docked here on the other side, so we just go ahead and switch that side. And it'll go on its way back. Again, it doesn't drop TNT on the way back, but when it goes off again, it will unleash all of its might. And then here we have the giant crater that left behind. And as you can see, when the TNT reaches the bottom, it just kind of bounces around and creates these caverns down here. So again, this isn't a super practical build. Normally you wouldn't need this much damage for a standard trench digging bomber. And you might not even want this much damage because there's a lot of collateral damage involved. And you'd probably also want something that's quite a bit easier to build. But man, is this thing fun. But I'm going to do a tutorial for the standard, much easier to build, much more practical trench digging bomber. I'll put a video out for that in a couple of days, so look for that. And if you want to watch a video of me building this thing in survival, then click the video on the right, or you can click the video that YouTube picked for you on the left. And I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye now.